Hello, on this video I'm going to show you how the enumerator works. I'm going to create a project, console application, and the enumerator is created inside the class but outside the main. Public enumerator, and I'm gonna call it player weapon type, and the first type will be a knife, and then an axe, then a pistol, a railgun. So this is an enumerator of weapon types. So the types are knife, axe, pistol, and railgun. So now I'm going to create a function and this function receives a parameter of type player weapon type. So player weapon type, player weapon type. And all it does for now, it just prints the player weapon type that we pass. That's all it does for now. So what happens here is that this enumerator forces any parameter that will be passed to be one of these types here, either knife, axe, pistol, or railgun. Now notice that the knife, axe, and pistol railguns, the options of enumerator gets translated to an integer, and usually the first option is 0, and then 1, 2, and 3. So this is 0, and then axe is 1, pistol is 2, and railgun is 3. It is a good practice though to initialize this to 0 right here. You don't have to, because the first parameter of the enumerator is always 0, but it's a good programming practice. So now here in the main, if I call the do something function, then now I have to pass a parameter of player weapon type, and when I put the dot notation, notice that the options right here that I have are the same options that I enter, the same variables that I enter inside my enumerator. So I'm going to choose railgun. Now we know the railgun is an integer. Let me take that back. We know the player weapon type dot railgun is an integer, and we know the value of that integer is 3. So whenever you print this thing here, we're going to print the railgun. So let's run this program. So railgun, and we can also print the integer value of the player weapon type parameter, and that gives us a 3. So the advantage of using enumerators is that you force the values, you force a strong type, you force the values passed here to be only of the enumerator types. Now if you're happy with the explanation, then you're done with this video. If you want to go a little bit more in depth, then keep on watching. So I just told you that the player weapon type enumerator forces any function, any parameter to be this type here. In other words, these options. But we can't cheat if we want to. And the way we cheat, we're gonna pass a parameter and we're gonna force it to be something else. So let's force to be a valid value for now. So let's do 2. So I'm typecasting the integer 2 to be of type player weapon type. So when I compile this, I pass 2, and then pistol and 2 gets printed. Now I am kind of cheating here. I'm typecasting. So if I can cheat, I can put some value that's not on my numerator. So let's try 5. So now notice that this code compiles just fine, but 5 is not a type on my enumerator. So if I pass 5, I prints 5. Now, how can we avoid not having this kind of problem? How do we know that a number that the caller is passing is not inside this enumerator? So we can test it. And the way we test it is by a function called isDefine. And the isDefine function takes 2 parameters. The first parameter is the type of, and in our case our type is the player weapon type, and the second parameter is the object we want to test. In this case is the parameter that got passed to us right here. Now isDefine is a function that returns true or false. It's a boolean function. So I'm going to create a boolean here, and I'm going to name it isValid. So what's happening here on line 27 is that whenever this function, whenever isDefine function receives the first parameter, which is the player weapon type, and then receives also the value, the object, it tests if this value is inside the player weapon of type. In other words, if it receives 5 here, it checks if 5 is an option. If it is an option, then returns true. If it's not an option, returns false. So now we can test if the parameter is a valid parameter or not. And then we can do an if statement here. So if is valid, then let's do the other way around. So if it's not valid, then we're just going to print full bar, else we're going to print the values. So we're going to pass a invalid value, which is 5, and if we do, we get a full bar. So let's pass a valid number, 3, then railgun and 3. So the whole point of using enumerator is that it forces the parameter, or forces whatever you're passing, to be within these values here. But you still need to test it, because there is a way for people, for the programmer to pass a value, to force a value within your parameter that's not here. And the way you do it is by testing. So let me put some comments. So test if the value is valid, and this here is typecasting an integer to player weapon type, and that's how it is for enumerator. Easy, huh?